Hello everyone and welcome to the Lower Your Shoulder podcast with me, Ben McKelvey.
And Jake Robbins.
Let's do it.
Today we're going to be talking about fitness for musicians, discussing physical health and mental well-being and creativity and how it all kind of ties together and how important it is. First of all, let's talk about, I guess, the more obvious benefits of physical health that most people know, but it's probably still good to serve as a bit of a reminder. Jake, you've been training now for quite a few years. What are some of the physical benefits that you have found and that you know that everyone can kind of appreciate?
So I've been in and out of training for a long time, and I think everyone knows that you have improved general health. It lowers risk of diseases, heart disease, improved stamina, endurance.
It overall is a pretty good thing to be doing, right?
Yeah, in general, I think everyone knows that. I think for me, I just notice that a lot of negative impacts creep into my life when I'm not doing it. And that is across the board, from mental health to feeling slower, low on energy, less happy, all those types of things. So obviously it's a no-brainer. It usually comes down to whether I'm motivated or not. What I've realized recently is I think I used to be like, right, I'm clocking in now. I'm smashing it for like 3 months. I'm just going to nail everything and my diet's going to be amazing. And whilst that is a way of doing it, we all know that you do that, you might see some amazing results. You then burn out and you go like, right, I've reached my goal. I'm going to sack it off now, and then you're going to be back to square one.
I think it's, we're going to talk about this today. It's so important, whether you are brand new to training or you're dipping in and out of it, like you said you have, to talk about consistency and routine and not going too hard, too fast, or stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, and obviously we're tailoring this discussion for musicians, but obviously it goes for everyone, that if you can get yourself in a good routine where you are benefiting your physical and mental health, life gets a lot better, right?
Yeah.
I think most people know that, but it's a good reminder. So let's talk about routine and what works for you, what works for me, and how creatives can get themselves in a better routine to improve all aspects of their health.
So what I've realized recently, and I don't know if this is getting a bit older, a little bit wiser, but I now don't try and do a lot in the gym. I really try and just turn up.
Mm-hmm.
And I've realized that when I don't feel like it, if I just say, all I've got to do is get to that door, usually the rest takes care of itself. So literally, my battle is getting in the car and getting to the gym. And what I've then realized is once I'm there, because I've been training a little while, I'm not focused on trying to really like completely kill myself so then I can't walk on the weekend.
And no one should ever train like that.
Yeah.
Athletes don't train like that. So why are you training like that?
Yeah.
I don't want to veer off too much from the point about routine, and we'll come on to this in a bit more detail about how hard you should push yourself as well. But going back to routine, so you've said that once you can get out the door, you've got your gym gear on, you're in the car, it's all right, right? Like they say, like the most important training session you can do is the one that you don't want to show up for, because that's what makes the difference. That separates you from someone that stayed in bed, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of routine, do you find having like a set time, like I am going to the gym at 6 a.m. or whatever it is, do you find that helps?
It helps me, yes. And the reason I mentioned about I've just got to turn up is the routine is basically based on waking up, going downstairs and getting in the car. And the reason I focus on that as my routine the gym side of things, I actually really enjoy. So I don't struggle with the actual gymming. It's the mental block before you get there, which for whatever reason is really hard. So what I do is I get up at 6:45, in the car for 7. The gym, luckily, is literally 7 minutes away. And then I train until 7:45, home. That's it.
Most people, you know, with a typical 9 to 5 can get to the gym if they want to get there, really, right?
Yeah.
So I found, you know, for me, like talking about routine, I actually found, and I love training, right? You know, I've been training for a long time now, probably over like 10 years. And I do really love the training bit. But obviously, like everyone else, there are mornings when I'm like, I don't really want to be going out there, especially in the winter, right? And I would say to anyone that's struggling with like actually getting to the gym or fixing that mindset, that a routine is started, in my opinion, the night before. Like that bedtime routine to me was a thing that made it so much easier and like an absolute no-brainer. So I always suggest to like clients that I train or anyone that having a regular bedtime is the thing that makes you do or not do the things the next day.
Yeah, you're
without
right.
doubt.
You're
without
right.
doubt. Like sleep is the only time that we ever fully recover from anything. So whether you need a bit more recovery from like, you know, physically, like maybe you've had a bit of a day, you've been moving things around the studio, you've been lugging all your stuff in and out, or whatever it is, you've been overworked a bit, or it's the mental fatigue of kids or work again, or whatever it is. Having that regular bedtime will mean that you'll have a more regular wake up time. And if your body knows this is the time that I wake up, this is the time that I shut down for the night, this is the time that we train, you're just more prepped for it. Like the mind and body are so connected. And that's something that I think people really overlook.
I think you're right. I mean, I naturally have a bedtime anyway. Me and my wife, it's like, gets this time right, going upstairs. We don't even talk about it being at bedtime. It just is. We've got a young son, so that incentivizes us to get to bed because we're going to be up anyway. Luckily for me, I've actually used his wake up as a bit of an alarm for me.
I did the same thing.
And it's actually helped because I can't sleep past that time anymore. So actually the only time I feel like not going to the gym is when my bedtime's been a little bit later.
Yeah.
And you still wake up at the same time, but then you feel more tired.
Yeah, because you haven't had enough sleep.
Yeah,
you haven't had the mental and physical recovery
Yeah.
time. It's funny because a lot of people think that when you have kids, that's when things like, oh, you know, you're not going to sleep well. And yeah, obviously with babies, when, you know, teething and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I was the same as you. I was like, well, my son eats his dinner at, 5 o'clock at nursery. So when he's not at nursery and I'm looking after him, he keeps to his regular dinner time, right? So I just adjusted mine. I was like, well, I want to eat with my son. So I'll eat my dinner at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And now I eat my dinner every day at 5 o'clock, whether I see him or not.
Yeah, it's just it's just built in, yeah.
And I don't go to bed when he goes to bed. He goes to bed at, say, 8 p.m. But I've got a regular bedtime because when he wakes up, I want to be like awake. And do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
You're exactly right. It's kind of like you can use it as an excuse to be tired, or you can use it as an excuse to get in routine.
Yeah.
And obviously there's going to be times when that is going to go out the window, like kids are kids and life gets in the way. But for me, I am so keen on routine. I mean, you know how militant I am.
Yeah, you
with
are very militant.
routine. But that's only because I know how much it affects me the next day.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just not worth it's not worth messing with it. Like if I need to get up at this time and train the best that I can so that I'm fueled for the day and I'm pumped and I'm energized, whether we're recording, whether we're out on tour, whether I'm doing other stuff, I'm like, it's not worth staying up until I'm like, oh, I'm falling asleep in front of Netflix halfway through an episode or something. It's just like, I know I feel crap the next day.
Yeah.
And it's the same, like I did a post on this the other day about, it's funny, like when you become parents, like you give your kids a bedtime, right? And you give your kids a bedtime for a reason. It's so that they get used to going to sleep that time, so they don't wake up tired and grumpy and annoying the next day because they haven't had enough sleep or they've overslept or whatever. But then as like adults, we're kind of like, you stop doing that. And it's kind of weird.
It's just discipline, I think, with becoming an adult is all about freedom, right?
Mm.
And I think for some weird reason, we love the idea of like, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Which means that a lot of bad habits creep in. And let's be honest, like, when you're late teens, early 20s, you couldn't care less about that stuff. It all goes out the window.
But you have less responsibilities as well, right? So you're kind of like, well, I don't have to get up at 6 a.m. because I haven't got a kid.
No, exactly.
Or I haven't got a 9 to 5 job. So if I want to stay up to 2 a.m. watching South Park and get up at 10 a.m, doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think
like, you have to get up as an adult.
Absolutely.
So if you have to get up as an adult, normally at the same time, you should definitely be going to bed at the same time and making sure you're getting enough recovery so that the next day is a good day.
I think what happens is it's just if people have developed that habit, we all know some habits are hard to break, and some people struggle with insomnia and stuff like that, and some of it is a genuine diagnosis, and other times it's just through years of going to bed late and getting up at the crack of dawn, having minimal sleep because whether it's staring at screens or whatever, I mean, we're not going to get fully into sleep, but it is a big topic. But I guess for anyone who's, trying to break a bad habit, I would say whether this is trying to get to the gym or starting with a bedtime, you just have to start with a very low barrier, manageable task that you can do. Whether it is literally, I will be in bed at this time, or I will be in my car for the gym at this time. That's more achievable than saying, I'm going to go to the gym every day for 40 minutes. If you say that, you wake up going, I've got to go to the gym for 40 minutes. If you're just like, I just need to be in my car, then you're going to get there.
To the gym, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we'll come back onto this at the end of the podcast because I put some tips together at the end.
Cool.
But let's move on now to the kind of more mental health side of things and the role that exercise can play with creatives. As I said, there are the obvious things of going to the gym and eating healthier. But let's try and tailor this more like specifically for creatives, for musicians, and about why that's so important. Because I guess typically going to the gym and eating healthy aren't usually like, the two don't normally go hand in hand with musicians. I mean, you think of like how you and I used to live, like when we were 18, 19 out on tour. Like I look back at that now and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that couldn't be further away from how I live now.
I know, and I
so
look
how
at
are we alive?
I know. I look at pictures of myself, and I was genuinely like fat in the face. It's it's funny, you don't realize it, but you had no care for any of that.
There's less knowledge of it as well,
and to be honest, like in terms of mental health, I did not care, and I was happier than ever because I was just having the best time with my friends. I think the reason it's more of a topic now, or maybe it's like more people are aware of the topic. I don't think when we were doing it, it was so much of a spoken about topic. It wasn't, basically. And now that term luckily has become very well known. And I think I've noticed with myself, look, to tie into the routine thing, I have a routine which I stick to most of the time. I'm not as militant as Ben. But what it does allow me to do is when I notice myself feeling a bit rubbish, feeling a bit down, not being as productive, not having as much energy, I can usually pin it back to, oh, you haven't been going to the gym.
And those things, let's say like you're feeling like a bit more achy or feeling tired, those are physical negative feelings, right? That's like a physical thing.
Yeah.
But then that plays on the mental side of things. So if you feel like, oh, I'm feeling a bit tired today, body's aching a little bit, I didn't really get up and walk around. And so then for me, I then find I just feel more negative later.
Yeah, it's negativity creeps in every aspect.
And then and anxiety as well. You can start questioning. I mean, certainly for me, I need that like kind of release in that hour or so to like get any frustration out.
Well, what it is obviously scientifically the endorphins get released, and through that you also have clarity because you're active, your mind is occupied, but also having a rest because it's a different part of the brain. because whilst you're resting in your sets, for example, or you're on a treadmill, you're thinking about stuff. You just are, but there's no pressure on what you're thinking because you're also doing something that's quite strenuous. So it allows you just to push aside all the stress that creeps in and actually think with clarity. And I think that is hugely valuable for me. I notice sometimes when I don't go to the gym, like I'm just constantly multitasking, not knowing what I'm doing next.
Got no like kind of mental structure.
Yeah,
and
it's just
everything seems a mess, right?
Everything's a mess. Everything's cloudy.
I find as well, I recently injured myself on our video shoot.
Oh yeah, didn't realise you got it off.
So yeah, now I'm back now. Just a bit of ligament damage, but I'm okay. No break, fortunately. But I trained on the Monday and Tuesday, busted the hand on the Tuesday afternoon, and then didn't train again. I did like some walking and stuff. I got my daily steps in, but I immediately saw, like, usually that time in the morning when I go to the gym, I was sitting around a bit more. I was on Instagram a bit more, and I was kind of like, I was being kind of productive, but I think I was lying to myself about how productive I was being. So I was kind of like, well, I've done a post and I've done like a story about what's going on, and then I've had a bit of a scroll, and I found that I was like spending more time on Instagram. The more time you spend on social media, the worse it is for your mental health. Like
100%. We'll do another
conversation,
another episode.
But it ties in, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of like if you're trying to bench press or you're doing a 5K jog and you're getting out and you're pushing your body to do like something physical, you haven't got time to look at pointless shit on Instagram.
No.
And that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
You know, the mental benefits of it is sometimes it can be down to something as simple as you've got less time to put bad, pointless things in your brain.
So I love the fact of going first thing in the morning, and I just want to point out I'm terrible. If I don't go within that window, I won't go. That is me. Other people are more flexible, but I've just like, I've missed my chance now.
I think that's a really good thing that we need to go into a bit more depth.
I don't know why that is, but that's what I hold myself to. And actually I've started being like, because I like to help in the morning with my son, I have a cutoff time. So the later I get to the gym, that's your fault. You got less time in the gym. So I try and hold myself accountable that way as well. I don't feel bad about it, but I'm just like, oh, well, I turned up today and I did this. Other days I'll get there early and I'll have a really long workout. I'll feel good. But either way, yeah, the consistency there is what allows me to keep doing it. But yeah, in terms of mental health side with it all, I just think the very least is like you're getting there first thing in the day, and it's like you're not looking at the news, you're not looking at social media, you're not putting the negativity straight away. A while ago, I can't remember who it was, but they were like, a very successful entrepreneur, and they were like, I don't read the news. It's like, don't need to.
From the 4-hour work week. I think I
I wasn't actually, it wasn't actually him. You know, obviously lots of people, Tim Ferriss.
Yes.
Which he's got a great podcast and great book. Loads of people have adopted that, but it's a very simple thing. And yeah, just that thing of waking up and putting bad stuff in your head. If you can do something positive at the start of the day, no matter what happens at the end of the day, at least for you yourself, you've done something beneficial for yourself. And I think that in turn makes you happier in general.
Yeah.
Got to the gym, done it, feeling good, walking out, like that sets you up for the day.
So a quick note for anyone listening that might be thinking about starting training or getting back into it or whatever it is. In terms of training times, I won't go into too much detail on this kind of stuff, but it's don't overcomplicate it is a really important thing to take away here, because as I said, I've been in the fitness space for a while now, and there are so many different studies. You can find a study on anything that contradicts anything on the internet, by the way. Like literally everything makes you sick and everything makes you better. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I've experimented a lot with training times. So I was kind of like, when I'm on tour, I'll try and train. Do I train first thing in the morning? Do I train after lunch so I get more sleep? If I'm in the studio for the day, do I train first thing? Do I take a break from the studio in the afternoon? Do I go at the end of the day after the studio? And there are lots of different studies and stuff to say like, maybe your strength is higher in mid-afternoon. And it's like...
They crack me up, all those studies.
I mean, like... don't worry about it. If you start work a little bit later, as a creative, or maybe you're just mainly like a session musician and touring artist, it's like, yeah, well then you're probably not going to train at 5 o'clock because that's when you kind of start work, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you're getting in at 2, 3 in the morning after a show, and that's mainly your livelihood, don't be getting up at 5 in the morning to train.
No.
Definitely don't be doing that. I don't care what study says. Prioritize sleep and find a time that works for you, that you feel good at, that you can keep consistent. If you do that, you will get really good results, and more importantly, you'll be able to sustain those results because you'll be able to just keep going. If you give yourself a difficult schedule, the harder you make it, the less likely is you're going to stick to it or even make it at all.
Yeah. So I've got a good friend of mine who is the complete opposite of me. He goes after work. He loves the gym, and he really looks forward to it after his day at work. So I'm not saying that my way is best. He is way more locked in than I am. But what works for me is, because I just find my day gets too hectic, and I'm a creative, so I'm all over the place in general. So there's always reason to do creative stuff. So if I don't go before I start that, chances are I'm not going to stop doing that stuff. So that's just what it is for me.
I mean, personally, I'm the same. I've experimented with all kinds of times depending on what I want to be doing. And I found that, I love training as well, but I have to train first thing in the morning because life gets in the way.
Yeah.
I just find that. And then as much as I love training, it can easily go out the window. And that's coming from someone that loves training. So if you're getting it back into it or starting from scratch, or maybe your confidence isn't quite there yet in terms of getting to the gym, you're not quite sure what you should be doing, you need to make it easy for yourself. If you're tired at the end of the day, or work or family life is always like a bit all over the place, then my advice would be get up, get it done first thing in the morning, and just do it at the same time every morning.
I know we've spoken a lot about routine, but I think it is really important. But also for your family, if you have a routine and they know that's when you go to the gym, they know how to deal with all the other stuff that they have to deal with. It's like, that's when Jake goes to the gym, I do this, and then he's back to help me. That also is how you fit things in. And it's the same, actually. I'm going to tie this into creativity. Like, you can book your creativity in, even if you don't feel like it. I go on a Monday evening, I say to my wife, that's my creative time away from like daytime, because it's like a different kind of creativity where it's like freedom, and it's like that night, that is what I'm doing. And it's almost like going to football training, it's just part of our diaries. So there's no arguments there. I have dinner early and then I go off.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because in the past I've made comments in other radio interviews and whatever, saying that like, it just comes to you, man. And that is true in a sense. Like, sometimes you will, a lot of the time, just get an idea for a lyric or a hook or whatever, and be like, I've quickly got to lay this down, and it comes out of nowhere sometimes. But you're exactly right. You can absolutely schedule in that creativity kind of section in your week and in your day. And the more you do that, the more your brain will be like, this is the time that we write.
Exactly.
You and I, when we were writing the album, got in a really good routine with that, where we were like, these hours in the week, this is when we're writing or recording. And first of all, it was writing. So my brain was pretty prepped for that. After a few weeks, I came in and, we have a couple of sessions where we were like getting through it. And then, we'd have a couple of sessions, we'd knock out two songs. And we were just like, what? That is mad. And it's consistent, and it's just like training for anything. You train your brain, right?
You do. I think subconsciously your brain is then aware that the time is coming up, so you start thinking about it before you even get there, being like, I need to have something for that session. And also with creativity, there's so many different sides to it, and I think maybe goes unnoticed. So like, yes, there is the magical spiritual thing where the actual idea comes out of nowhere, because that is true. But after that, there's a lot of work to do.
You got to sit down and you got to write those lyrics. You got to figure out how the verse goes into the chorus. Should it go to that chord there? Like, that doesn't come out of the blue.
No.
And you'll be walking the dog and suddenly go, you know what, mate, should have been a G.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, that doesn't happen.
No, you have to be sat there working at it. So, yeah.
So final point I just want to make on that, and something that I've found when I came back from tour, how I couldn't believe how trained my brain and my body were from being on a tour. So the hardest thing I find when I come back is that you're in a very weird routine. So it got to sort of 7 o'clock in the evening when I'd be at home after a tour, and I'd be like wired. I was like, I've so like adrenaline was going, because that was the time that you'd be getting ready for the stage, and it'd be like, oh, you know, the doors are open, you got half hour till you got on the stage in front, play in front of thousands.
And I just want to point out that this is like 6-week long tours. So like this is a long time building that routine, not just a week tour, which some people.
The first couple of days as well, I was knackered. So I was like, oh God, I'm going 8 o'clock, so I'm in bed now. I was like, knackered. But then a few days getting into that. So it's amazing how you can train your mind and body to get into a routine to help you be creative. So yeah, very important. So I want to talk a little bit now about managing stress and how being more active, eating healthier can help decrease stress for creatives. So as creatives, musicians, whether you're working hard on a record, you're going out on tour, stress is pretty high for us.
Yeah.
Might not realize it. I definitely didn't when I first started out. And it wasn't really until I kind of actually started looking into it and I felt it. Stress on the body, especially touring, obviously, stress on the mind. It's really important to control that kind of stuff. And going back to like the mind and body being linked, we're just going to kind of explain about why it's so important to manage your stress and how you can manage your stress as a creative. I mean, do you get stressed?
I do get stressed. I think everyone gets stressed. I think I get less stressed at the moment. I think it all kind of, it like all folds into one for me. If there's stress, then I'm unhappy. If I'm unhappy, I'm not as healthy. If I'm not as healthy, I'm not as productive. Like, I think for me, it's just all sides just completely fall apart. If my stress levels pick up and I don't do something about it, and you know, whether that's through fitness itself or creativity, I just don't feel good about myself. So stress is something we all go through, you know, whether it's financial stress, and being a creative,
you never know when we're getting paid.
You're up against that for
PRS.
You're up against that for many reasons. And look, I don't want to speak about that too much because we do choose this way of life. We both have other jobs now which kind of satisfy a little bit of the financial side, which alleviates some of the stress.
I think that's that'll be another conversation about work and another podcast for sure. We should definitely talk about that.
So I think what can happen is, as a creative, you try and just be creative all the time. This is what I've found. You're like, I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can, sometimes to make pennies. And you're not thinking about the big picture. You're just head down being like, I'm going to work really late, really hard. And if I just keep going and I keep going and I keep going, it will all figure itself out. And I think with that comes a lot of stress because you're not lifting your head up to breathe, basically. So it's just like layering on, you know, for example, when I've worked with multiple bands in the past, you know, you could argue that I didn't charge enough, and you've always said that. Through that can be a lot of stress because you're like having a lot of work to get through just to get by.
Yeah.
And whilst it's what you want to do, it doesn't completely make sense. Because
I've battled this so many times. Now, as you said, like you and I have other jobs. We still get to be creative in those fields, but I've found that I'm like so much happier as a musician.
Yeah.
With less financial stress. And stress is a really odd thing, and it's just so important to manage. And whatever your stress is, you know, financial stress for musicians is a massive deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we might go on tour and really we put all this blood, sweat and tears into making a record, and we go out and play it, and then you might not get paid your royalties for 6 months to a year, and then you kind of have to survive by selling merchandise, in which case you're basically like a traveling t-shirt salesman. And it can be a bit of a head fuck, right? Like I've definitely found that. Like when I was on tours, I was kind of like, this should be working better than it is financially. And then it kind of does. And then you're like, oh, that was good. But now I've got to pay this off. And then you're like, and when's my next job coming in? And it's like, it is stressful. And while we can't manage, sometimes we don't have control of those sort of things. What we can do is try and control our stress to make life better.
Yeah.
know.
And that's what I found. The gym itself just allows, again, for the clarity with what you actually need to do. Lift your head up, get your head out of the bubble, out of the stress, and it gives you that hour or 30 minutes just to be like, okay, how do I get myself out of this? Whether it's you're going for a run or whether you're in the gym, what it does is it just gets you out of the bubble of like actually being in the stress. So then you can actually alleviate that pressure and think, right, this is what I need to do. And by doing that, I will relieve the stress. Not only that, but the endorphins are releasing the stress as you're doing the exercise.
And if you stay consistent with it, you'll start to get addicted to that feeling. Unfortunately, a lot of creatives, especially out on tour, if you're a touring musician, a lot of the stress is dealt with alcohol, bad food, some people drugs, smoking, whatever it is. And I can completely understand that because it's like, it takes the edge off, right? And you and I have been touring since we were 14, 15. And that lifestyle is still very much present on tours. I found even the last one I went on, I don't really drink anymore. And I found that I was drinking, I didn't feel like a lot. But then I was starting to add it up and I was kind of like, a couple of beers before you go on, a couple of beers afterwards, a couple of beers on the tour bus.
You don't do that when you're at home.
And you're like, I was drinking like at least 6 pints a night for like 2 months. And you're like, Jesus Christ, that's actually like quite a lot of alcohol. And then from that, alcohol is a depressant. So I felt I was feeling more sluggish as the tour was going on because of the lack of sleep and the alcohol. Alcohol then made me eat worse because I was like, you want salty food.
Of course. You
then are dehydrated, so then you're not performing as well. And like on the last tour, I was kind of pretty into fitness. So, I actually trained a lot on that tour and I did look after myself. I just did drink more than I usually would have. So I kind of not balanced it out, but it was better than I would have done it before. But it's so easy to slip into that. Like, and, you can go to the gym, but then if you are really dehydrated, drinking lots of alcohol, eating bad food, it's not only going to like undo what you've done in the gym, but the mental side of it is just going to make you feel like there's no point.
Well, I actually think sometimes when people go to the gym, and this happens sometimes when you're just starting or maybe you've not properly got into it, there is that feeling of, oh, I've earned this way of eating. I've earned this now because I've
in and out, right?
I've been on a treadmill.
I've burned 500 calories.
Yeah, and it's that in itself for your mental health is terrible because essentially you're putting your body through all that, and at the end of the day, you're just going to see no benefit. So you'll quit. So you'll quit, and then you go, oh, I've done all that and I feel terrible because you're not really gaining anything.
And it doesn't.
It's easily done.
And it doesn't have to be like that. And we won't go too much into what I'm about to say next, but with fasting and stuff like that. But there are so many ways that you can live your life with techniques that you can still enjoy what you want to enjoy food-wise. You just have to kind of tweak it.
Yeah.
And there's lots of studies about what foods make you happy and what foods make you sad.
Yeah.
And, it's tough. Like, I get it. Like, I love like pizza. And if we've had like a long day in the studio, I don't want to go back and eat a fucking salad.
No.
You're out of your mind.
Yeah,
I'm like, nah, man, especially in the winter, I want like a nice warm pizza arriving at my door. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to do the other bit.
Yeah.
You need to like not do the fun bit all the time. Because it just...
Well, then it's not fun anymore anyway.
Exactly.
It's just normal.
And that's why, you know, I came back from like the last tour, and for the first time in my life, which is why I stopped drinking, I was craving alcohol. And I've never craved alcohol. I've always enjoyed a beer. I've always enjoyed a good night. But then I can go out and have a really good night with my mates, or a good few beers at a gig, and then I can just switch it off for like 3-4 weeks. Easy.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I was getting to 8 o'clock in the evening, and I was like, you know, I'll just have a beer. I'll just have a glass of Disaronno. I'll just have a gin. And I was like, man, this is very not like me. And I was like, and I just stopped. I was just like, nah, I'm not getting any of that. And it's mad how quickly that becomes addictive, or you feel like you need it, or it's like, oh, this would take the edge off. Well, actually, I know it's only a Tuesday, but it has been quite a long day, and you're like, it's I haven't got all the answers to deal with that kind of stuff, but
and it is
you just have to do your best to get away from that kind of way.
It is personality dependent as well. Like, I think maybe both me and you are quite lucky. You know, I do like to have a couple of drinks on a weekend, but I have no desire really anymore to get pissed. Like, I genuinely just like a gin and tonic, or I like a beer, and I'll have 2, and I'll be, that's enough for me. Like, I'm lucky I have that in me. Lots of people don't. They have 2 and they want 20.
Which I used to be to be fair.
Okay.
But what I would say...
Well, so did I, to be fair. But then the
younger, right?
Yeah, the consequences didn't matter. But like, now I know the consequences.
Oh my God, man.
And I can't deal with it. And I think we both want to be productive all the time. So we just know that that's productive time lost, basically, through having a hangover.
There's a couple of things creatives can take home from this about alcohol, right? That I think that I kind of wish that I'd heard. One is, if you are driven enough to be a creative and to be a musician, and you're brave enough to go out into that world of like putting yourself out there, making records, trying to kind of quote unquote make it, whatever that means, you are definitely strong enough to put that other bullshit aside. If you're strong enough to make a record, and you're strong enough to get out on a stage
and be vulnerable
and be vulnerable by showing who you are through your art, you can say no to a beer. Yeah. You just have to get your mindset into it. And the second thing I would say is that if you are a self-employed creative that wants to actually really make a bit of a dent and live off it financially and all that kind of stuff, you know, you might have to do other work or whatever, but you want to you want to play shows, you want to make records, man, you ain't got time to be hungover. No. You have not got time to be hungover. Like, the last hangover I had was after Blink last summer, and great night. Wouldn't change it. It was great, but I couldn't function for like 3 days, like properly. I felt awful. I went to the gym. I was like, I just want to just go home and have like a bit. You
just don't feel switched on at all.
Nah.
And that haze, that fog lasts longer the older you get.
In your 20s, enjoy. In your 30s,
switch it off. Yeah,
bring it down. Bring it way down. It's just this. You know, where people always be like, oh, you know, when you're 30s, you won't be able to deal with a hangover. And I remember hearing that in my 20s, being like, mate, I'm a heavyweight champion. Believe me, nothing's going to stop me. Jesus Christ. It's like, I mean, I haven't drank alcohol for nearly 100 days now.
Yeah, wow.
And I was just like, man, I just feel awful.
Yeah.
I was like, nah, it's just... I'm not saying I'm never going to have a beer again, but I was like, it's got to be really worth it.
Yeah,
it's got to be really worth it. You know, maybe a mate's wedding or something. You're like, I'm going to have a beer. I'm going to, you know, dance like an idiot till 2 a.m. Yeah. That's fine to do every now and then, but you gotta fill your life as much as possible with positivity.
Yeah, and especially if you're serious about this and being basically being guided by the power of art. It's like you've got to succumb to like the sacrifices to put your best stuff out there.
I think as well that something that dawned on me recently that people may or may not have realized, but in terms of, let's take the all the health stuff away from it, in terms of like, you can live longer, you can live a better quality life if you're fit and healthy and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about it from like a business point of view, right? If you're a touring musician, nowadays with streaming and the way that the music industry has evolved, if you're like a small to mid-tier band, the bands that make a living off it are the ones that can tour the longest and the hardest. So with that in mind, you've got to be able to physically tour longer than bands used to have to.
Yeah.
In terms of how many shows you're playing a week, but also the years. Like if you want to keep making money and you want to stay in the music industry, you're going to have to keep touring. Okay, some musicians and some artists will do great from streaming only and don't have to tour that much. But for most bands, you're going to have to get out on the road.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to flog merch. So if you were in better shape and you put on a better show, this is just from a business point of view. If you put on a better gig because your voice is good, you got loads of energy, you've nailed your performance, you'll sell more merch.
Yeah.
If you sell more merch, you've got more money, which means you can then go off and make another record and then you can go and tour that. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so if anyone listening to this that sort of thinks, oh, I don't really like the gym. Oh, I've always got away with sort of eating what I wanted. It's like, that's fair enough. But you need to think of this like a health pension, right?
Yeah.
It's boring to think of it like that way because who wants to talk about a pension or mortgages? You know, it's boring, boring shit, right? But for kind of musicians in their 30s, you do have to start thinking about that stuff. And, you know, you put it away now, reap the rewards later.
Yeah.
You know, it's so important.
Just on that note, with everything we spoke about, we're not saying that you need to go out and run a marathon, enter Tough Mudder, do CrossFit for the competition in the summer. But what we are saying is a few little tweaks that you can implement into your life for the next 10, 20 years and build on them. Like, we're going to be speaking a lot about building on things, and the slow build is really quite important because it allows you to stick at something for a long time. And if you want to do this for a long time, our advice is just start tapping into that stuff now, like Ben said, like a health pension. If you can start next week, don't put it off, and just start trying to like improve just a little bit. You might get the little bug that happens and you'll reap the rewards and you'll see the benefits within your creativity, your productivity, everything like that will just suddenly you'll have more time for things, you'll be more switched on, all that kind of stuff. Ben's going to leave us with a few tips that you can implement into your daily life right now or weekly life.
So I'm going to give you guys just 3 tips as a coach that helps musicians get fitter and healthier that you can implement for free right now. I'm not going to go into all the scientific details about each one, but first of all, drink 2 liters of water a day. Absolute minimum. It's so good for your health, massively increases your energy, positivity, all that kind of stuff. Is an absolute no-brainer. So tip number 1 is to drink a minimum of 2 liters of water per day. My second piece of advice, do your absolute best to have a regular bedtime and a regular wake-up time. If you can only do one, have a regular wake-up time. The reason for this is that if that alarm goes off at the same time every morning, Monday to Friday, you'll naturally get a better going to bed time. But going to bed time? Was that what? Sleep time? Whatever. So yeah, just routine. Wake up time, going to bed time, as consistent as you can, that it's always the same is my tip number 2. And the third tip that is really important for mental health is to get those screens switched off earlier. Now, you haven't got to just like go back to the 1930s and have no internet on in the house in the evening. We all like watching Netflix. We all jump on WhatsApp to chat to mates in the evenings. That's all fine. But what I would say is that at least half an hour before bed, iPads off, no phones. Everyone can do that. It's for free. No TV, half an hour before bed. Just try it. Just turn everything off, do the washing up, get ready for bed, have a shower, whatever. I guarantee you'll sleep better. You'll fall asleep faster. Your quality of sleep will be better. The next day, you'll be up ready to take on the world. So water, turn the screens off, have a regular bedtime. Let me know how you get on. And if anyone out there, like creatives, are looking for more advice, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening this week. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you like what you've heard today, please share with a friend and follow us where you listen to your podcasts to help us grow the LYS community. See you on the next one.